The man buried under the name Sheriff Tom Walker wasn't a sheriff at all. The real sheriff of Red Creek had been lying face down in the dust for 3 days, his blood long since soaked into the dry Arizona earth, and the man who killed him was now wearing his badge. Red Creek was a forgotten town, the kind that barely made it onto maps. A couple dozen low buildings, a crooked main street, creaking porch boards, and windows filmed with dust that no morning ever fully cleared away. The wind moved through the town like something alive, pushing sand and scraps of paper along the road, whining through door hinges, tugging at hats, whispering in a voice that sounded like stories from people long gone. Life here was quiet, simple, like the wooden planks under their boots. Everyone knew everyone. Every nod, every smile was familiar. But the familiar world of Red Creek had shifted in a single moment. Sheriff Tom Walker had always been talkative. He stopped at every store, asked about cattle, about children, about the health of the old folks. He knew nearly everything that happened in town, and people trusted him like a friend and a protector. But 3 mornings ago, when he stepped out onto the street, something was different. He didn't tip his hat. He didn't smile. He didn't even look people in the eye. He just paused for a second, as if trying to remember where he was. His hand rested on his holster, not casually, but ready, like every movement might cost him his life. Mrs. Galloway, who owned the shop with the red-painted porch post, was the first to speak. "Morning, Sheriff." He looked at her as if he'd never seen her before. A long pause, too long. Then he gave a short nod and walked past without saying a word. By noon, half the town was already whispering, "Sheriff Walker's acting strange." What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that they were right. Because the man with the star on his chest wasn't Tom Walker. His real name was Cole Harper, and just a week ago, Harper had been a wanted outlaw. He robbed payroll trains, left bodies cooling in the desert, and stayed one step ahead of the law. He wasn't a lawman, wasn't a hero, and he sure as hell wasn't a good man. The meeting had happened 3 nights earlier, in the darkness of the desert, when Harper was riding hard through sand and rock with bullets whistling behind him. He had split from his gang after a job gone wrong. Too many guards, too many shots fired, too little loyalty, and then he ran into Sheriff Walker. Walker, tall, gray at the temples, eyes cold and steady, stood with a revolver in his hand. Dust curled around his boots. Moonlight rested on his shoulders, on his holster, on the badge that seemed brighter than anything else in the night. "Drop the gun," the sheriff said calmly. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Harper shot first. One shot and the sheriff hit the ground, air leaving his lungs in a rough, fading breath. Harper stood over the body, breathing hard, but guilt never came. What came instead was a cold, clear thought, an idea. By dawn, Tom Walker was buried beneath a lone mesquite tree, and Harper rode into town wearing another man's badge, another man's life. He knew no one would suspect right away. Bandages, dirt, exhaustion, all of it helped hide his face. Every step, every gesture was calculated so no one would question him. And at the same time, every day was a walk through fire. One wrong move, one extra smile, and the truth would rise to the surface. The town looked calm, but he knew calm was a lie. Every creaking floorboard, every quiet footstep, every breath behind a closed door felt like a threat. He took his first step down the main street, dust swirling around his boots. He was no longer just a fugitive outlaw. He was the sheriff, and how well he played that role would decide everything. The lives of the people in this town, his own life, and the secret that could never be allowed to come to light. The first days in the role of sheriff were harder for Cole Harper than any gunfight he had ever been in. He knew how to shoot. He knew how to rob. He knew how to run. But he didn't know how to be a good man. Every morning he woke up on the narrow cot in the sheriff's office and, for a second, forgot where he was. Then his eyes would fall on the star lying on the desk, and something inside him tightened. This wasn't just a disguise. It was someone else's life. Townsfolk came to him with small problems, a stolen chicken, a fence line argument, a drunk cowboy who started a fight at the saloon. And every time, Harper was afraid of saying one word to many. He spoke little, short, rough. people decided the sheriff had simply gotten tougher. Life must have knocked him around. They whispered, "Yeah, best not argue with him now." And that worked in his favor. But there was one problem. The deputy, an old man named Eli. Eli had served with Tom Walker for nearly 10 years. He knew how the sheriff walked, how he laughed, how he held his coffee mug, and he was the first to feel that the man in front of him was somehow different. One evening, Eli stepped into the office and quietly set two mugs on the desk. "Like always, no sugar," he said. Harper froze. He just nodded and took a sip. "Too fast, too careful." Eli watched closely. Then his gaze drifted over Harper's face, the bruise under his eye, the cut on his brow, the swelling along his cheek. "They say you ran into trouble out of town," Eli said softly. "What happened, Tom?" Harper paused for a second. This was his chance to explain everything at once. "Ambush," he answered hoarsely. "Was chasing two horse thieves. They led me straight to their friends. One of them fired. Horse reared up. I got thrown onto the rocks." He swallowed. "Lucky I made it back to town at all." Eli was quiet for a long time. "You used to tell the whole story, every last detail," he said at last. Harper slowly lifted his eyes. "And I didn't used to see 3 men die in one night," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's better to just forget." The old man said nothing, but the doubt didn't disappear. And as if that wasn't enough, on the third day a rider came into town wearing a long, dust-covered coat and a silver star on his chest. Federal Marshal Daniel Rose. His horse stopped in front of the sheriff's office, and the whole town seemed to hold its breath. The marshal was tall, gray at the temples, with the cold eyes of a man who had seen too many deaths. He had personally known the real Tom Walker. Harper understood that the moment the marshal dismounted and said, "Been a long time, Tom." They were the most dangerous words he had heard yet. Harper forced himself to nod. "Marshal." Rose stepped closer and held out his hand. "Glad to see you're still keeping this town in order." Harper shook it. The marshal's grip was firm, confident. Too confident. This was a man who could smell a lie. "I'm here on business," Rose said. "Looking for a bastard. An outlaw, name of Cole Harper. Ever heard of him?" Harper's heart slammed against his ribs. So hard he was sure the whole street could hear it. But his face stayed like stone. "It's quiet here," he said shortly. "But if he shows, I'll let you know." The marshal held his gaze a moment longer, as if trying to see the man beneath the bandages. "I hope you will," he said softly. When the marshal walked away, Harper let himself breathe out slowly for the first time in days. He was no longer just an imposter. He was an imposter being hunted, and the man who could expose him stood only a few steps away and was already beginning to suspect. From the moment Federal Marshal Daniel Rose arrived in Red Creek, the air in town seemed to grow heavier. He didn't leave the next day, or the day after that. He settled into a room above the saloon, from where he could see half of the main street. Each morning he would sit on the balcony with a cup of black coffee, simply watching the town wake up. From the outside, it seemed like a man resting after a long ride, but a careful observer could see that his eyes were always calculating something. Cole Harper felt it on his skin. Every time he stepped out of the sheriff's office, he sensed the gaze. Not direct, not brazen, professional, the way a hunter looks when he's on a trail. The marshal started small. He talked to people.comer, to the stable owner, to the bartender, to the postman delivering letters to surrounding ranches. "Has the sheriff been back from his trip long? Was he hurt badly? Strange behavior, don't you think?" he asked as if in passing, calmly, without pressure. Yet the questions came too often to be random, and the answers didn't match. "He's barely speaking these days," one said. "He used to joke all the time," added another. "Now he's like a shadow." The marshal memorized every word. On the evening of the third day, he returned to the sheriff's office. Without warning, Harper sat at his desk, pretending to sort papers. In reality, he had been staring at the same sheet for 10 minutes, understanding nothing. The door opened. "Evening, Tom." Marshal. Rose closed the door behind him and walked slowly around the room, like a man who already felt at home. "I was at old Farmer Hobbs today," he said. His boy got caught stealing a horse recently. You let him go. Harper nodded. The boy gave him a chance to make things right. The marshal stopped. You used to say if you give a thief a chance, he'll steal from you and him too. The room fell silent. Too silent. Harper shrugged. People change. Rose studied him with a long look. Yes, they do, he said slowly. He stepped closer. Close enough that Harper could smell dust and tobacco from his coat. Tell me, Tom, back in Tucson, when we caught the Mercer brothers, who fired first? The question sounded casual, almost lazy, but it was a gunshot. Harper stayed silent. He didn't know. No answer existed. A second stretched like a rope before a hanging. Then a shout rang out from the street. Sheriff, the horses are running. A child under the wagon. Harper sprang up first. Instinct moved faster than fear. He rushed outside, grabbed the reins of the panicked team, fell to the dust, but managed to turn the horses aside. The wagon wheel passed an inch from the boy. People shouted. Someone ran forward. Someone helped him up. Thank you, Sheriff. Almost had a disaster. Harper breathed heavily, hands trembling. The marshal followed silently, watching. He didn't just see the act. He saw the reaction, pure, instant, unplayed, and it unsettled him. Later that evening, when the town had quieted once more, Rose stood by the hitching post, gazing at the stars. Eli approached him. Well, the old man asked. The marshal remained silent for a long moment. I'll say this, a man can hide under another's name, but habits are far harder to hide. You think it's not him? Eli asked softly. Rose turned his gaze toward the dark window of the sheriff's office. I think the truth is somewhere close, and soon it will come to light. Inside the building, Cole Harper sat in darkness and understood. He could fool words. He could fool a face. But the past was already riding toward him along the dusty road. After the incident with the horses, the townspeople began to see the sheriff differently. Now, their eyes held more than respect, they held something else. Gratitude. The woman whose son had almost been run over by the wagon brought a pie in the morning. The old man at the stables cleaned his horse for free. The bartender at the saloon silently set a glass of water in front of him. When he saw his hands trembling, and all of it struck Harper harder than any bullet ever could, because he knew they were thanking the wrong man. He sat in the sheriff's office late at night, the town asleep outside. The lamp on the desk smote the glass, casting a yellow circle of light. On the table lay the sheriff's star. He stared at it for a long time. Before, this thing had been just a piece of metal, a means of survival. Now it had become something else, heavy, almost unbearable. For the first time, he realized he was beginning to behave like a real sheriff, and that scared him more than being exposed ever could. From the street came the sound of boots. Harper quickly pinned the star back on his chest and lifted his head. Marshal Rose entered. Working late, Tom. Plenty to do, Harper replied shortly. The marshal closed the door behind him and placed a folded sheet of paper on the desk. I got a response from Tucson, he said. A cold chill ran through Harper, and confirmed that sheriff. Tom Walker was supposed to escort a prisoner to Phoenix 3 weeks ago, but he never made it. Silence became thick. The roads are dangerous, Harper said. Plenty of bandits. Yes, Rose nodded, but no one saw the prisoner, or Walker himself along the way. He stared Harper straight in the eyes. Strange, isn't it? Harper felt his heart pound in his throat, but his face remained stone. What are you implying, Marshal? Rose exhaled slowly. I'm not implying anything yet. I'm just gathering facts. He picked up the paper from the desk, but did not leave. You know what else is strange? He continued. People say you've gotten a better shot, faster, cooler under pressure. It was a blow, because the one shooting now wasn't Tom Walker. It was Cole Harper. Maybe life teaches faster than you'd like, Harper replied. The marshal looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded. Perhaps. He turned and left. But now, everything had changed. Rose was no longer checking, he was waiting for a mistake. The next day, tension became almost tangible. Even Eli walked gloomier than usual. He watched Harper in silence more often, especially when Harper talked to the townspeople. And that evening, the thing Harper had feared from the very beginning happened. A body was brought into town. 2 ranchers had found him in a ravine a mile from the road. A man in tattered clothes, a bullet hole in his chest. His face had been mangled by scavengers, but some things remained untouched. The badge on his belt, the real sheriff's star. Eli stood nearby as they laid the body on the table in the barn behind the office. His hands were shaking. "My God," he whispered. "It's..." Marshal Rose slowly raised his gaze to Harper, and for the first time, there was no doubt in his eyes, only cold certainty. "Looks like Tom Walker has finally returned to his town," he said quietly. The world around Harper became deafeningly silent. All eyes were on him. All roads had ended. And in that moment, he realized the mask was no longer just cracking. It was falling. The barn behind the sheriff's office smelled of blood, dust, and death. The body found in the ravine lay on a roughly built table, covered with a canvas tarp, but the edge of the fabric had been pulled back, and the metallic shine of the badge on the belt spoke louder than any words. The real Tom Walker had returned home, just not in the way he should have. Inside stood 3 men, Marshal Rose, Eli, and Cole Harper, still wearing the sheriff's star, which now felt like a branding iron searing his chest. Silence stretched too long. Eli's gaze shifted between the body and Harper. His eyes were full of pain, but a flicker of hope remained desperate. Stubborn hope that there was an explanation for everything. The marshal shared none of that hope. "I found tracks near the ravine," Rose said calmly. "The horse dragged him. The body was left already dead. Judging by its condition, he's been there more than a week." He stepped closer to Harper. "Want to say anything, Sheriff?" The word hit like a slap. Harper looked at the body. Something inside him broke, not from fear, but from the weight of all he had done, and everything that came after. "I didn't plan to stay," he said quietly. Eli flinched. "What?" The marshal remained still. Only his hand slowly moved closer to his holster. "I killed him in the desert," Harper continued, his voice hoarse but steady. "He stopped me, told me to drop my gun. I shot first." Eli closed his eyes. "My God, Tom," he whispered, still calling the dead sheriff by habit. "I only wanted to leave," Harper said. "Take a horse, some water. Disappear." "But then I saw the badge, and I thought if I become him, they'll stop hunting me." The marshal nodded. "So you decided to play the lawman?" Harper shook his head. "At first, yes. Just a game, a mask, a way to survive." He looked at his hands. "But then people started coming for help, and I started helping." Silence filled the barn again. Eli slowly sank onto a crate. "Old man Hop's boy, the wagon yesterday," he murmured. "That was all you?" "Yes." The marshal stared at him for a long moment. "Good deeds don't erase a murder," he said finally. "I know." Rose drew his revolver. "Then it will end the way it should." And in that moment, gunshots rang out from the street. One, then another, then shouting. The marshal spun sharply. A stable boy burst into the barn, gasping. "Bandits! From the north? There are 5 of them. They're shooting at the houses." Harper and Rose exchanged a glance. A moment, and that look was everything: truth, hatred, understanding. The marshal tossed Harper his own rifle. "Even an outlaw can die doing some good," he said firmly. Harper caught the weapon, and for the first time in a long while, the mask on his face fell away, replaced by resolve. They stepped outside together. Dust, shouts, shattered windows, frightened townsfolk. 5 riders fired from horseback, driving their horses down the main street. Harper took position by the water trough. The first shot and one of the bandits flew from his saddle. The marshal covered him from the right. Eli, hands trembling, loaded a rifle on the porch. This was not a fight for the law. It was a fight for the people who had believed in the wrong man, but believed sincerely. The last bandit wheeled his horse and fired almost point blank. Harper shoved the marshal aside. The shot rang dull. The bullet hit beneath the ribs. Harper fell to the dusty street, staring at the faded sky. The marshal finished off the last shooter. The town slowly fell silent. Rose knelt beside Harper. "Why?" he asked quietly. Blood filled Harper's mouth, yet he managed a small grin. "Probably because he would have done the same." "Who?" "The real sheriff." The marshal removed the star from his chest, and for the first time, he did it not as proof of a crime, But as a sign of respect for a man who realized too late who he wanted to be, Harper closed his eyes, and Red Creek would forever remember the day they were saved by a man who was not a sheriff, but died like one.